Cybersecurity Q&A live stream where we try and answer all of your burning cybersecurity questions. We talk about certifications, we talk about career, we talk about universities, we talk about how to acquire the necessary skills to start your cybersecurity career. We're talking about removing misinformation that's currently flowing about boot camps, about necessity for degrees, about needing the maths and so on and so forth. So as always, guys, drop your questions in the chat. We're going to spend the next hour talking all things cybersecurity and hopefully help you answer all of your burning questions. So we'll just wait and see, and hopefully we're going to get a decent crowd, and we're going to spend an hour or so chatting all things cybersecurity. So buckle up. Hopefully we're going to get some folks. As always, chat is open. As usual, some house rules. Sometimes some of these live streams get really busy, so there's loads of questions in the chat. So I'll try and get to all of your questions, but be mindful and be aware that sometimes I fall behind, so it'll take a little time. But we'll try and get through all of your questions. So if you have any questions, drop your questions in chat, and we'll start cracking on as soon as we get some questions. So making sure we're live across all platforms. Good stuff. Okay, so we start with 𝐾𝐨𝐧'𝐭 says, do you reckon ISO auditor certs are required for GRC roles? It's a difficult question to answer uniformly, 𝐾𝐨𝐽, but chances are most of the organizations, if they're going to want to have ISO certification because it's one of the two that leads to more sales and leads to more business. It's either ISO or SOC 2. So having ISO auditor certs, especially moving into GRC, is always going to be helpful. Hello, Day. Welcome, welcome. Same says bash or PowerShell. There is a right answer. Is there? I think it really depends. I'm more of a bash person. I've never been a fan of PowerShell, but I guess everyone to their own, preference. Emily says, hi, I'm very interested in this side of IT. Can I get into this through apprenticeships? Yeah, of course. Of course you can. Zool says, I hope you're doing well and thanks for the motivation. I hope I enjoy your videos. Thank you very much, Zool. That's what we're doing. We're trying to, motivate, help people, and provide some useful information for you guys in your journey to cybersecurity. Hello, ZNet. Hello, hello. Someone says, is Network Plus Cert still worth it, or should I get to CCNA instead? We always talk about it, and we get a lot of questions about this. Always, my opinion is, I don't think it's worth spending the time and the money to do CCNA. You have to remember, CCNA is Network Engineering Certificate. So if you want to go into networking, yes, do CCNA. But for cybersecurity purposes, Network Plus is more than enough. We're not here to build and design networks. We're here to secure them. So in terms of networking knowledge, I think Network Plus is more than enough. And it saves you a lot of time. CCNA is not easy cert and it's hard to pass. So I wouldn't waste time and money doing CCNA. That's just my opinion. Harv says, I'm leaving high school soon to go to college for ICT. As in my third year of the course, I get cybersecurity. Where can I go after that? You have to figure out, Harv, what kind of role you want to do. It's for me, it's pointless to advise you what to do because, you guys need to decide what's the best for your career. So what you want to do is you want to do a bit of research and understand what each role in cybersecurity it entails and what would be your preference. Someone says, what was the hardest thing you learned? Um, it's probably a couple of things. AI security has been quite hard because obviously there's a lot of learning, how to, because I've did extensive sort of, I wanted to properly learn. So I went and trained and built various AI models to understand, how they work, how they operate in order to secure them. And probably second close to that was a number of years ago, I've done CKS certification. So Certified Kubernetes Security Specialty. And that was really hard. That was probably the hardest exam that I've ever done because it's a practical hands-on exam where you need to do 20 tasks in terms of securing Kubernetes. And I think, I always say anyone's moving into engineering and DevSecOps, Kubernetes security is a very important skill that very few people have. So that's kind of would be the couple of things. Then it says, what are your thoughts on future of network security engineers? Well, it's obviously the future is going to change. And I think obviously we're moving away from networks being on premise, and we're moving away from, old school firewalls, old school switches and routers. Most of the knowledge is being transferred into cloud. So most of the networks nowadays is built in cloud. I think the fundamentals and the knowledge doesn't change, just the application changes. So I think, where you're going to apply your networking security knowledge, it's just going to change from on-premise to cloud. But other than that, not much. M7 says, which online simulator do you recommend for SOC, TryHackMe or Cybery? I'm a big fan of TryHackMe, M7, so I would always talk about TryHackMe, and then probably the next level up from that is I really love what Blue Team Labs, and my internet just dropped off. Hopefully you can hear me, guys. My internet just dropped off, but looks like it's reconnected, so 2 seconds. Let me see where I was. Sorry, guys. I did 2 seconds. Let me find the chat, guys. Bear with me because obviously the chat gets really busy. December. I think AC7, the main thing you need to figure out, as always, I always say, you need to figure out what roles you want to do. But the problem is people want to get into cybersecurity just for getting into cybersecurity, so without realizing what role they want to do, because the path is going to be very different, Once you've done Security Plus, everything else then changes in what you want to do afterwards. Taka is introducing AR certification for AI risk. What's your thought? I haven't seen the ISACA certification itself, but I think, the common thing and the common theme I've been discussing with people, with the rapid adoption of AI and companies moving in that space, you being able to secure and know how to, help companies secure AI is going to be really important. So, I think it's a great move. Whether, whether you need a certification, that's another point to discuss, because I always say, these certification bodies are just kind of milking money from people, because people still assume that, you need a certificate to be successful in cybersecurity. It's not about degrees, it's not about certificates, it's all about skills. I mean, it says, do you need to go uni? Currently, I'm doing a level 3 extended diploma in IT, not sure what to do after. Definitely don't go in uni. I always say to people, don't waste money and time to go in university. Yeah, Dominic says, human risk is the most important aspect. Invest in your people. Yeah, and you need to be able, sometimes, security, there's a lot of people talking about, technology and tools. Cybersecurity is a lot about communication, is a lot about influencing. So all of those skills have become very important. How do I get into cybersecurity without college? You don't need a college to get into cybersecurity. Everything stays the same. All you need is, a couple of certificates such as Security Plus. You do in your home labs, and build necessary skills. That's the most important. When a roadmap for SOC analyst job titles that carry the same tasks. So, it's just generic, going to be IT security analyst, cybersecurity analyst. They're similar kind of roles to SOC analyst. There's a lot of carryover. So, roadmap for that is very similar. M7 says, I just did CCISC2 last week and the exam was actually different than the content. Yeah. But, for example, I always say M7, I see too many people, wasting time and money doing IC2CC, and is being lauded as a free certificate. It's not a free certificate. You have to pay $50 to get the certificate. And whenever do you see IC2CC certificate on a job spec? It doesn't exist. Bree says, hello, Maris. I'm interested in getting a cybersecurity, but I'm lost and confused. Harv says, personally, I'd like to go into the police force and work for them, hacking into the phones and devices. It's a good idea, but the problem is you're not really going to be hacking into devices and phones. And most of the time, it's impossible to hack into devices and phones. What you're going to do is you're going to collect forensic evidence. Hacking doesn't really exist in police. Best way to network? Couple of things. Obviously, go to in-person events, conferences. Just go and meet people. Secondly, obviously, build your network on LinkedIn. Chat to people, but be thoughtful about how you approach people. I always say, don't just message them and say, I want you to mentor, I want you to help, research, talk about what people are posting, what are they sharing, provide, something tangible. Ayo says, what will I need years of experience to become IM analyst? Yeah, but, every role, you have to start somewhere. So, I always say most of the companies, especially, on that spectrum that they ask for 2 years worth of experience, everything can bypass if you got the right skills and you show that you can do the job. And that's the big gap, I always see between people going to university and doing certificates. You can't show that you are able to do the job because the practical skills are the ones that show. And that's how you bridge the gap with home labs and acquiring the necessary skills. Thank you for the nice words as well, guys. Oh, chat lost again. Where is it? Just be. Give me some time, guys, because as I always say, the chat gets really busy. So I'm going in chronological order through all of the questions, and I'll try and get to all of your questions, guys. So just bear with me. Where was I? Hey, does social networking matter for pursuing a great career in cybersec? Yeah, I always say, Virus, it gets to a point that, I'm a big proponent of the same thing. The last 2 roles I got, I haven't applied for them in cybersecurity. The roles, I was very intentional about building a personal brand. I was very intentional about, building my social network and meeting as many people because, you never know who's going to lock that door for you. So that becomes very important. Codex says, I want to go into network engineering. Starting with Cisco network fundamentals is a good idea. Yeah. If you're going to go network engineering, obviously Cisco is probably the biggest provider in the networking sort of world. So yeah. Ray says, is Pentest Plus a good set? No, waste of money and waste of time. Pentest Plus is a theory exam. When did you ever, for pentesting, answer questions? You need skills. If you want to go into pen testing, there's only kind of 2 certificates. I did a YouTube roadmap, guys, for pen testing if you want to look at it. But the gold standard is OSCP. And if that seems to you guys too steep straight away to jump into it, you do PNPT and then work your way into OSCP. But anything else is not worth the money and waste of time. DNL says, if I want further information, security was the best preparation for me as a first graduate. Well, you should have plenty of information from university if you graduate, but what you won't have is the skills. So that's the biggest gap you need to bridge, DNL. You need to build a home lab and build the necessary skills. Alex says, how many years you work in cybersecurity? I've been working in cybersecurity for 10 years. Yeah, just lagged because I lost for some reason, my Wi-Fi disconnected, but hopefully I'm back and hopefully most of you guys came back as well. My daughter is 17. I would like to get into cybersecurity. How can she get started? I would say simple things, Citalicious, is in my bio description on TikTok, you're gonna find a link to my YouTube. So currently, I think I've created 4 full blueprint roadmaps into each of the cybersecurity roles. So I got one for SOC, I got one for GRC, I got one for security engineering or cloud security engineering, and one for pen testing. So that's the starting point. Watch the videos, and they will explain everything that you need for each specific role, and that gives you a great blueprint to start. So, it explains what certificates, what courses to do, how to build CV, how to apply for jobs, how to get the right skills, and things like that. What can you say people who say that AI will be taking over cyber jobs? They don't know what they're talking about. That's what I would say, Julie. The thing is, AI can take over some of the jobs, but you have to remember that, I always say, how many companies are now replacing their marketing sales department with AI? And then 6 months down the line, they are rehiring most of the people because AI has failed miserably. Now, I always say, AI will not replace people. People who can use AI will replace those who can't. So it's important to upskill and understand how to secure, how to use AI, but it's not going to completely, remove all of the roles. What skills do you recommend for getting into GRC? GRC is, you obviously need to be great at risk management and risk assessment. So how to do a risk assessment, how to analyze risks, and how to present risks to the board. You obviously need to learn a few compliance standards based on your geography. And you need to learn a couple of governance frameworks, and you need to learn how to write and create great security policies. You need to learn things like NIST CSF, NIST RMF, NIST AI. There is framework now, things like GDPR, ISO 27001 standards, stuff like that. That's the kind of the main skills. What should you do straight after you graduate studying cybersecurity? You should build a home lab. You should do that even before you graduate. And that's why I've been talking in my last video that I just published on YouTube. The problem is, probably 90% of people who graduate with cybersecurity degree, they won't be able to find a job. No more probably than 90%, because they're all not ready for a job. They just learned the theory and basics and fundamentals. That's not enough. Robbie says, hey, my name is Robbie and I'm cybersecurity and I have a degree and started working in servers. Okay. I'm 16, I'm going to get into cybersecurity. How do I start? You start by figuring out, first of all, what you want to do in cybersecurity. Cisco course is a good way to start in cyber. It depends on what courses you're talking about, Cisco, but there's only one course, I think, Cisco cybersecurity, that's kind of okay, but most of them, I wouldn't waste time and money. The main certificate that appears on 90% of the jobs, especially in the entry level, is Security Plus. So that's where you need to go to. Aggie says, I'm right now in school. How can I start with cybersecurity? Again, watch my roadmap videos on YouTube and figure out what you want to do. Mitch, for some reason, I can't drop a link. Hopefully someone's going to join from the group, but I can't post a Telegram channel link in the chat. I'll probably drop another video and I'll just drop a link in there, or just DM me afterwards and I'll send you a link, Mitch. What does your off time look like? How often do you actually get to relax? I have obviously less off time, Daniel, because I do a lot of other stuff outside of my day job. But yeah, obviously, I'm an avid gym goer, so I go gym 5 times a week. I love racing, so I'm about to finish my sim racing rig, which is going to be, so my office is going to be split in two. So half of the office is all about cybersecurity, and the other side is going to be, I'm going to put all the Legos and all of the streaming, and I'm going to do some iRacing. So that's going to be my sort of relaxing time. But I go plenty of cybersecurity events where you get to relax, dinners, and obviously I do a lot of TikTok streaming, YouTube and stuff. But that's not the same as day job. So it's part of a relaxing time. Enrique says, what does it What does it need to start on the journey of becoming a SOC analyst? Well, first of all, you need to learn and understand IT and sort of technology fundamentals. So you need to jump on Professor Messer and watch, everything from A plus, Network plus to Security plus. But the only certificate you need is the only exam you need to pass is Security plus, and then it's about building a home lab. But if you want to find out more, Henrique, is about, again, go to my bio. There's a link to my YouTube channel. There's a full roadmap of what you need to do to become a SOC analyst. Everything is explained in there. Rips, what do you say? Do you believe that zero trust will ever be industry standard in networking? Well, it's kind of a standard now, but I think the problem is we're just toying with the acronym and word zero trust. The problem is you can never truly achieve zero trust, because at the end of the day, even if you embark on zero trust sort of architecture, you're still going to trust the certificate body and things like that. How is going to do encryption and things like that. So I would say it's not necessarily sort of a standard, but it's a goal and aim to achieve. We're never going to be fully zero trust 100%. Oh, it's getting warm. 2 seconds. Let me just take the jumper off. But yeah, I think zero trust architecture principles is a great thing to aspire to achieve. Definitely. Would you say SecOps is always the best team? I don't think there are best, travel. It all depends on the preferences and what you really kind of want to do. Some people obviously, some people love GRC, some people love, ethical hacking. So, SecOps is not for everyone. But obviously, SecOps is probably, the biggest team that most organizations are going to have. Because obviously, for example, pen testing requirement, what, you're doing pen test every quarter? But, security, defense, 24/7 monitoring, that happens, non-stop. Joe says, I was studying cybersecurity as a professional. Do you offer any certification? No, I do not offer any certification. Thoughts on DLA Piper law firm? I don't have any thoughts on the law firms. Do you need virtual assistant? I would love to be your assistant. No, I do not need a virtual assistant, but thank you. Opinion on purple teaming? I don't really have an opinion. It's a great thing to aspire, but that only happens in really big and large organizations who have massive blue and red teams who actually can get towards purple teaming. But I don't. There's no really opinion towards that. Would you see risks in AI these days, from devs to everyday people? I think the biggest problem is that we're talking about this vibe coding, especially now we're talking about agentic AI, and MCPs and what's happening with OpenClaw. The problem is, AI is, yes, it's a great benefit and it's a great tool to be used, but the problem is when people are, connecting potentially, corporate your own data and dropping those, MCP and agentic workflows in your machines without understanding how to properly configure and secure them, you are potentially open up yourself to all kinds of risks. Even the guy who created OpenClaw, he himself said, it's not something that could be deployed by a non-technical person because there's so many risks in there and dangers. And there's now videos and articles about how to properly secure it, because most people do not understand that. Again, we lost the chat. 2 seconds. Where were we? Oh, there we go. We were there. Software engineering or cybersecurity? Sammy, it all depends what you prefer. I'm mostly in cybersecurity, so I'm obviously going to see cybersecurity, but it really depends. What Joey says, what are the terms you should know when signing cybersecurity? the list is endless, Joey. The amount of terms in cybersecurity you need to learn, I can't explain this. I'm not gonna talk about this for like 20 minutes. Abdi says, hi, I am master in cybersecurity. I wanted to prepare skills for SOC analyst. You are a master, but you need to prepare skills for SOC level 1. I assume you just did master's degree. It really depends, Abdi. I can't, answer how long this is going to take. Everyone depends on what pace you're going to go and how quickly you can build labs portfolio and acquire the necessary skills. I would say anywhere from 3 to 6 months normally. Best advice for someone from a logistics background and start from scratch to become cybersecurity. It's just simple, Nori. As I said to everyone else, jump on my YouTube, figure it out the role that's going to be the most applicable for your, technical sort of acumen. Watch the blueprint videos on my YouTube and just follow them. I say to people, you can get a cybersecurity role in 9 to 12 months, but the boot camps, the degree, and all of that cohort that's selling you, the lies that you think you're going to do one certificate and you're going to land a 6-figure salary. That's not the case. Getting into cybersecurity is really hard, especially now. So it requires a lot of work, a lot of dedication, but you can get there. And that's what I'm saying. You just need to put in the time and the work, and you'll get there. Should I keep studying Python or AI is taking over? It really depends, Tergos, what you're studying Python for. Well, don't forget, especially if you're talking about, AI, although the AI is built with most of the time is Python, it's using Python libraries and stuff like that. So if you want to move into AI security and AI, then Python is going to be always useful. John says, I'm following your advice. I'm building a small lab at my house with 2 servers. I need a firewall. Well, firewall, just use pfSense. That's very simple. It's an open source. What programming language is important while getting into cybersecurity? None. You don't need a programming language. A programming language is only applicable to a very small section of roles, such as, pen testing or security engineering. But then again, that's kind of advanced. The only language you ever need to consider, but that's only, as I say, only if you're moving into security engineering or penetration testing, is Python. If you want to be a SOC analyst, you want to be GRC, you want to be generic cybersecurity analyst, you don't need no programming languages. Hi, Hooded Finite. Hello. I have a question. When did you use Active Directory? How should I describe it in the CV? Yeah, sure. I mean, you just build, obviously, again, it's about building a labs and showcasing how you can, first of all, secure Active Directory. So it's about describing, how you can manage and secure proper Active Directory, environment. So I would, I'll do a couple of things. So you can obviously install Active Directory and then do various attacks to understand how these attacks could be used against Active Directory. How can passwords be exfiltrated, brute forced against Active Directory? How various attacks could be happening, and then obviously explaining how you can secure. So you understanding and showcasing in your CV. It doesn't have to be extensive, but it's about a couple of sentences about what you did in your home lab to harden and secure Active Directory. Because the one thing I'm often talking, especially now with people, is that identity is becoming the new perimeter. So identity security is becoming really important. So you have an Active Directory, lab. It's definitely going to be a great, skill to be had. So, where else we were? What's next? Do you work with RMF programs, specifically NIST 853 Rev 5 controls? Not extensively, Zach, but yes, I have used NIST RMF and NIST CSF controls, yes. Thoughts on AI exploits? I mean, it's really early days. I think we've only seen kind of one glimpse of the latest AI exploits. Obviously, I think we're kind of moving towards the world where AI is going to be attacking and AI is going to be defending. So it's going to be a kind of AI battle. But I don't see AI crazy adoption because the current statistics show you don't need crazy 0-day hacking capabilities to infiltrate networks and hack companies. So I think we're still a long way away from that. Aaron says, should I choose Network Plus or CCNA? I always say Network Plus. Is California's imposed law for age verification is real on any OS really for security? No, I don't think it's for security. I think sometimes, most of the time, the same as what we're doing with social media. It's about, I think, protecting underage people. We've seen, Australia, I think now published social media underage law that, no social media for under 16s. So I don't think it's always for security purposes, but it's about protecting, the most vulnerable who are, whether they're bullied, whether they, there's all kinds of dangerous places online. Hello, MP. Do you know the good course for DevSecOps? Yes, Takumi. There is a course called Practical DevSecOps. Actually, let me Google. I don't remember what's the company, but there is actual course specifically for DevSecOps, and it's hands-on. So it's DevSec. Yeah, that's what it is. It's just called Practical DevSecOps. That's the website. PracticalDevSecOps.com. That's the course. I'm also recording. I think I'm gonna record. Maybe not tonight, but tomorrow, because I've written up the whole blueprint for DevSecOps Korea, so that's coming out potentially either tomorrow or Thursday. So I'm gonna drop that on my YouTube as well soon. At the data center technician, I can't really help you, Gavin, here because I'm not really into data center technician kind of. I can use posted about the recent exploits. Is the limit for AI? Is there a limit for AI on cybersecurity? Yes, of course there is. Again, you have to remember. Yes, AI can do a lot of stuff, but AI cannot understand human emotions and human patterns and the way humans behave. It's lacking human intelligence and all of that. So it can do a lot, yes. But I always say, AI systems without human in the loop are, we're asking for failures. So that's why the best AI systems always have a human in the loop who's kind of reviewing and kind of assessing what decisions AI is making. Dave says, currently system application engineer that's CCNA certified. My goal is to move into cybersecurity. Any advice? We get a Security Plus safe, and then it's about, acquiring the necessary skills for the home lab and figure out what role you want to move into cybersecurity. It's not necessarily on my profile, Wemtin, but if you go in my bio description, not the bio link, because link is to LinkedIn, but bio description, there's a link to my YouTube. So go on my YouTube, and then you'll find, there's all the roadmap videos on my YouTube. Would you think the best MDR, MXDR providers are for SMEs? Tom says, I think, you can't go wrong. Obviously, I think, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, I think you can't go wrong with that because it's easy, accessible, and it's easier to configure if you're running Windows estate. If they have to call out kind of the best, I think it's between CrowdStrike and Sentinel-1, Tom. As a beginner, what certs would you recommend? Only Security Plus. You don't need anything else. To work with ReliQuest. No, I do not. Goob. Mr. Reddington, do you use a VPN for daily browsing? No. No, I don't use VPN for daily browsing. Lion says, you're doing consultancy. Do you have SOC team you partnership with? Or just provide advice? I don't really run SOC as that, because mainly my expertise as I provide cybersecurity leadership and sort of cybersecurity program advice and build sort of strategies. So that doesn't really come into my remit. If I need, if a company I'm advising needs to build a SOC, then yeah, I'll I have a few providers that I work with and I will refer them. But that's kind of the extension of it. Where was it again? Oh, there we are. Wyndham says, I was starting and getting exhausted with a lot of resources. Where can I get a roadmap for SOC? On my YouTube, Wyndham. What fintech do I work for? I work for a fintech. We provide white label consumer financing business for telcos, basically. I found them from Peru company. Good. Jared says, when learning to be cloud security engineering, would learning red teaming first be efficient? No, definitely not. Dash. Would you think about broken? Vuln token access control, can it still be found a lot on HackerOne? Yeah, I think so. Or should I stick to red teaming for the long run? It's up to you, Jared. But I always say, red teaming is a lot longer and a lot more difficult path. And I talked about it. If you go into my YouTube and watch the penetration testing roadmap, I always say, if you really want, yes, red teaming is great. For red teaming, I always say, pick SOC analyst, GRC analyst. I think you can prepare and land the role in 9 to 12 months. For red teaming, I think it's closer 12 to 18 months for a proper roadmap to get OSCP, to get all of the certificate and all of the knowledge, because you need a lot more skills and knowledge to become a red teamer, and there is no sort of entry-level red teaming roles. Is it? Of course it's possible, Gilwen. MMBB, I'm interested in GRC as a teacher. What do you recommend? Think? Yeah, I always say, I think teachers make great people in cybersecurity because they learned, or their master skill is translating difficult concepts to non-technical people. And that's a great skill to have. So, as a GRC person, yes, it's a great, pivot of career. What you need to do is, you need to learn and understand how to write security policies, learn, the compliance frameworks, governance frameworks, learn how to do risk management and risk assessments. I always recommend, buy yourself a book, how to measure anything in cybersecurity risk. And yeah, stuff like that. Joel says, hi, I just connected on LinkedIn. Cool. Good to meet you, Joel. Cloud security engineering versus ethical hacking. I would always go to cloud security engineering, Jared. I've done that, for a number of years as well, and I loved it. If you are starting now, what will you do to become a SOC analyst? Exactly what I did 10 years ago. I started my career in SOCs, went in. So the exact same thing. I went through all of the Professor Mess's videos. So A+, Network Plus, Security Plus. Got myself a Security Plus certificate. I think I've done one Azure certificate, which was, I think it was it was either MS500 or AZ500, one of the two. And then built myself a home lab, ton of practical portfolio labs and stuff like that for SOC, learned about SIMs, learned about EDRs and how to investigate incidents and network a lot. Those of you who probably haven't seen my lives previously, I often talk about networking, about, going to conferences, meeting people. Like, for example, I got my first cybersecurity job because I kind of became, because I knew MITRE ATT&CK was really kind of taken off in a SOC world. So I kind of learned everything inside out there is about MITRE ATT&CK. So I went to a junior sort of webinar where I presented myself. I was new. I haven't had a cybersecurity job yet, but I presented and explained how to use MITRE ATT&CK framework for people working in a SOC. And one of the hiring managers saw my webinar, and that's how I got my first cybersecurity job. So yeah, I would do the exact same thing now. Greg says, worked in IT for 10 years, CompTIA experience with Python, JS, JSON, HTML, CSS, Azure, Intune, etc. Best way to get into cyber. So obviously, you got the certs. You got obviously a lot of skills, but not necessarily most of them. Some of them, yeah, really well translate. Intune is great skill to have. Azure, JS, JSON, HTML, CSS, that doesn't really help you in any way in cyber, especially in the beginning. But, the best way to get in, if, you say CompTIA experience, I don't know. If you haven't get CompTIA Security Plus. If you want to differentiate and add another, I would do maybe Azure SC200. And then it's about, Greg, it's about, acquiring cybersecurity specific skills. So it's about building a home lab. I talked about on my YouTube, there is a whole home lab video about, Kali Linux, Security Onion or Wazoo, plus vulnerable machines from VulnHub. And it's about, using attacks and investigating those attacks, looking at attacks from networking perspective, how they look on Wireshark, how they look at EDR, how to push the logs into your SIM and investigate, how to detect and build analytics to detect those incidents. It's about building actual practical skills. Like if someone says, how you would investigate a phishing attack, instead of, reading a book answer, can you actually explain and show me how you would walk through? What's your thinking methodology? If there is, 10 vulnerabilities, how would you prioritize which vulnerability to patch? Can you actually, practice those real practical skills? And, then it's about, finding the job. How do AVs detect executable files even they are heavily obfuscated? Well, they're not necessarily detecting files hacks. They are detecting behaviors, because nowadays we don't really do AVs just based on files and file signatures. We do behavioral sort of analysis on the way they operate. So that's how they're kind of detecting the executable files nowadays. Is it better? Already, and Anthropic help me black hat. Yeah, Anthropic can help you with that, yeah. Onyx says, what happens if you are a civilian and make Gemini AI running at full 100 capacity? Nothing happens. It depends, how you make it happen, but, if you make it happen normally, then, yeah. Is Troy Hack Me certificates worth it? I would say they're worth in acquiring skills. They're not necessarily worth gonna help you land the job better. That's why I always say, in terms of certificates, guys, do not become a badge and certificate collector. You have to think about. I always say at the entry level, you only need 1 or 2 certificates. Like I always say, people just do random certificates that don't make any sense. Like you want to be a SOC analyst? Go on LinkedIn. Find 10 job specs about SOC analyst and look at what the employers are asking for. That's the certificate you need to get. And I bet you, as I say, SOC analyst, I bet you 90% of them will ask Security Plus. Maybe some of them will ask additional 1. And if you have money and time, do that additional 1. But everything else is about skills, knowledge, and your thinking. there is no magic certificate that's gonna get you the job. It's the skills. Any tips on the OSCP exam? Can't really give you much tips. I haven't done myself OSCP, so can't really help you, Serenity. How can I learn everything to be good IM consultant? I now started, but I am a little bit lost. Well, IM is about, it's about, obviously, IM kind of as a concept is easy kind of to understand, 1070. But the one thing where you need to learn is you need to look at the biggest providers and the biggest tools. So it's Okta, SailPoint, and probably Entra ID. Each of them has their own certificates. So if you look at, I would start with Microsoft. Azure Entra ID is pretty big. There's lots of organizations using Azure. So SE300, it talks and explains everything that you need to know to become IM analysts in Azure space with Entra ID. So go and do the SE300 course. And then if you want to really differentiate, pick one between Okta and SailPoint. I think SailPoint is really, I see often, necessity for skills with SailPoint. So that's what I would explore. Best MDR provider. There is no best line. It all depends on your use case. I always talk about this as well. There's no best tools. There is no best providers. Your company, your architecture, the way you tools you have, the way you integrate, everything's going to change. There's nothing best. To have a conversation with you. I support banks with networks and security. I work at Nokia. Yeah, Joel, just ping me on LinkedIn. If you add it, just ping me. We can have a chat. Shop Stewart says, hey, I have done IT Essential under Cisco, so I was asked for direction from there. Go on my YouTube, look at my roadmaps. What system you use? I use a couple of systems, but mainly is obviously Windows. That's my kind of day work stuff, and obviously I've got on my gaming PC I kind of double boot between Ubuntu and Windows. Is BTech IT good for cybersecurity? No. One thing is a security perspective. Do you think quantum AI is going to excel? No, I think it's quantum. Quantum AI, that's miles away. We first need to get to quantum encryption. So I don't know. We can't really predict what's going to happen in 6 months, let alone what's going to happen in. Quantum is being touted to be, I think 2035. So we're still far away from it. What would be a good master's to complement cybersecurity degree? Jay, I wouldn't waste the money on doing masters in cybersecurity. The only thing I would say, if you got a lot of experience that you want to move into leadership, then potentially MBA. But I wouldn't waste money and time on any degree, let alone masters, or let alone bachelors. What laptop do you recommend for uni cybersecurity? It doesn't really matter. Any laptop will do. As long as you got 16 gigabytes of RAM for your home labs, doesn't matter what laptop you have. Bjorn said, I'm studying for CompTIA Security Plus. What should I do next in cybersecurity as a college student? Home lab, Bjorn. The most important thing is a home lab. Should I bare metal Linux if I want to pursue cybersecurity? No, you don't need to. You can just use virtualization ping. You don't necessarily need to bare metal it. Because you're going to need anyway. If you're going to build a home lab, you're going to need to virtualize all the other machines anyway. So there's no point bare metaling the Linux. Unless you got a spare laptop. But junior pen tester here says, Clyde, should I stay in the field or switch to blue team for a higher salary? It depends where you're going to switch. But, since you're going to pen tester, I assume you got obviously some Python skills, you got some engineering skills. cloud security engineering is really good field to explore and think about, Clyde. So yeah, that's definitely something I would explore and think about. Crystal, between software engineering and cybersecurity, which is the best? There is no best, Crystal. It all depends what you want to do. I can't advise what is best. There is no best. Yeah, exactly, Kenan. Yeah. Joel says, have you heard about Nokia Deep Field Defender DDoS solution? What are your opinions? I haven't heard about it, but nowadays the specific DDoS solution is kind of pointless. Most of everyone's running a WAF, which kind of it comes pre-packaged with a DDoS solution by itself. So, unless you're running on-prem networks, DDoS solutions is kind of pointless. And I think most of the people anyway use something like Cloudflare or Akamai. So, I don't really have an opinion for that, Joe. Where should I start learning cybersecurity? Pinocchio, you first need to understand what you want to do. University or certifications? Definitely not university, and you only need one certification. How important is to know coding if you are going to get a reverse engineering job? Well, yeah, of course. How are you going to reverse engineer if you don't understand the coding? So, very important, Stan. What's your opinions of the new click fix variations? I don't really have opinion. I'm not really familiar with those variations. How hard? Sandy says, how hard is to get a job in cybersecurity? Very hard, Sandy. It's very hard, and that's what I always say. I think people have been by boot camps, universities, and all of the certificate bodies. People have been sold the lie. They're thinking, I'll just do a couple of certs and get a university degree, and I'm going to land a cybersecurity job. No, getting a cybersecurity degree is really hard, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of dedication, and a lot of hard work. So it's not easy. That's for sure. Breno says, hey, Brazil here. Hey, Breno, welcome. Good to see people from Brazil. Yeah, Bele. If you were looking to do projects regarding cybersecurity, go on my YouTube again. There's a full project breakdown on how to build the home lab for SOC. But there's also I specifically added a list of projects because you can do loads of, for example, install OpenVAS and do vulnerability assessment on down-out virtual machines from one hub and do OpenVAS vulnerability assessment, and then write a proper report. How would you prioritize? What would you fix? How would you patch the machines? As I always say, metasploitable, run attacks on vulnerable machines again. Download vulnerable machines from one hub, run metasploitable attacks on vulnerable machines, intercept network traffic via Wireshark. So you can look how attacks look from network perspective. Drop a Wazoo agent on a vulnerable machine. Then you can look how attacks are being detected via EDR. Push all the vulnerable machine logs into Wazoo SIM, Elastic SIM, whatever it is. You can see how then attacks are being detected and viewed in the logs. Then it's about how you write analytics, learn how to write analytics rules to detect those attacks from happening, in the future. How would you fix? How would you harden that machine? That's what you need to kind of practice. Where? Whereabouts are you? I'm in London, CyberAce. Looking for study for bootcamp for cybersecurity. The King says, I'm in college. Do you think I should go to uni or apprenticeship? Definitely not university. What universities or college would you suggest? I wouldn't suggest any of them, Phil. I don't think they're worth the money and time. Should I put Try Hack Me on my CV as a hobby? No, it's a practical experience where you build the necessary skills. It's definitely not a hobby. I'm a software engineer and I want to transition to cybersecurity. I've got CC cert. Where next? Learning networking, Network Plus and Security Plus, Nigel. Hamza says, I have cybersecurity degree. Is that enough to get into GRC? Definitely not. 100% not. Yeah, sponsorship nowadays is really hard to get, Naz. Yeah, sponsorship is not easy because I think nowadays, obviously, you have to be above and beyond the local candidate to get sponsorship. So yeah, that's not easy, but keep persevering, keep grinding, and I'm sure you're gonna get there. Can you stay fully anonymous online? You can to some extent, yes. There's so many roles in field. I don't know which to strive for. Well, you need to first of all figure out. You need to do a research and understand what each of them entails, because you're never gonna figure it out if you just, you need to understand to quite a good level of what each role does. Then you can understand what works for you. Matthew says, is Big Four cyber consulting better or cybersecurity engineering better as an entry level? I would never touch Big Four, Matthew. So definitely engineering better. I always say, I think Big Four is, especially at the entry level, you're going to, Big Four, imagine, they have thousands of employees. So you're going to learn very little of cybersecurity. I always say start in the small organizations because you're going to get a breadth of knowledge and you're going to do a lot more tasks that allows you to learn quicker and faster, learn way more. So yeah, definitely no Big Four. In second year of uni, I've been struggling to find a placement. Should I carry on to third? I mean, if you already started, Vishal, yeah, it's no point dropping it. Then yeah, of course, carry on. But as I say, I would have never started university in the first place. How secure is Tails OS? Can't really speak, I don't know Tails OS that well. What skills can I learn in cybersecurity for a hobby, not a job? Just jump on Lemon, just jump on Try Hack Me and just practice, play around. There is pre-security path that, kind of starts at the very, very beginning. So play around and enjoy yourself. If you don't want to have a job, but you just want to have a hobby, then yeah, by all means. What is one skill you recommend me to do as a minor? It's hard to kind of focus on one. I would say probably communication, curiosity. Continuously kind of learning and developing yourself, being curious about technology. I think that's always going to be helpful and carry you a long way. Which CF path doesn't require coding? GRC, SOC, Ricky. That's kind of the main ones that don't require coding. What are the most common vulnerabilities you still see in production websites today? I think still weak encryption standards. I see that all the time. Probably cross-site scripting not as much. SQL injection probably not as much. What else do I see? Applying correct security header policies. I think that's always misconfigured, and that can lead to a lot of kind of problems. What else do I see? Weak encryption standards, header policies. That's kind of the main ones. I think I think most of the other ones are getting kind of to grips to most of the stuff. I mean, that's what I see. I'm sure there's all other people. I think misconfigured identities, and obviously still what's it called? Exposed secrets. I think that's another one. That's always kind of a common thing to see. But yeah, sorry guys, I wasn't able to get to all of your questions, but that's my time. As always, as I said, guys, I can't always to get to all of your, DMs, all of your comments. I try to help as many people as possible, but you can imagine, I get hundreds of messages every day, so I can never get to everyone. So that's why we do these lives. But I'm probably gonna try and do another live, probably if not tomorrow, then probably Thursday. So again, keep an eye out for when I create an event. But guys, keep grinding, keep working hard. You can land the job in 2026, but you need to be able to check out the roadmaps that I've shared. Check out, the skills. It's not about certificates, it's not about degrees. You need to build yourself practical skills. That's the only way you're going to land a job in 2026. So keep working hard. And I'm going to catch you on the next one, guys. Have a great evening. I'm going to love you and leave you until the next live.